capstone course presentation in the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems major ever. We'll have the second ever tomorrow. Looking forward to that too. So I'm Tom Tomich. I'm the Master Advisor for the major, and I also am the instructor for the capstone course. And Maggie LaRochelle and I've been co-instructors. So I wanted to turn it over to our two speakers today. We're going to introduce in the room. We have current and future capstone course students, and we also have a number of clients and people who work with the team. So Emma and Zach, over to you.
Hi, welcome everybody. We just wanted to also welcome you guys to our senior capstone presentation for the Sustainable Ag and Food Systems major. I'm Emma.
I'm Zach.
I just want to take a minute to introduce also our clients. Supervisor Don Saylor was one of the main clients that we worked with. Marcia Tucker is one of our other clients. She's one of the owners of Sluicide Farm. And Kevin Sanchez is the director of the Food Bank of Yolo County.
Hooray for the clients.
So the last 2 quarters, we've been collaborating with pretty much all 3 of our clients to create what we've come up with as the Food Bank Farm project. The Food Bank Farm project was based on the idea that there is food insecurity in Yolo County. Yolo County is one of the largest agriculturally producing areas in California, except that there's also a large number of people in the community who are also food insecure. Food insecure by definition are people who don't really know where their next meal is coming from. And working with Kevin, we've kind of found out that that's a pretty prevalent thing. The Food Bank actually services 22,000 families a month, actually, which is pretty significant if you're thinking about how much food is available and how many people are actually not knowing where breakfast, lunch, and dinner is coming from. So the outline of what we're going to do today is go over our executive summary, our process of how we kind of worked our way through this project. We created this project out of pretty much nothing. This was kind of a collaboration between Dawn and Marcia and Kevin to kind of come up with an idea of how to address food insecurity and help the food bank and help Marcia create a farm that was producing for the food bank and help Dawn kind of produce this within the county and produce it elsewhere. So I think we can go to the next slide. So our executive summary summarizes the problem statement, which is the food insecurity issue in Yolo County. Some of the other prevalent issues that we found out during the food summit that was held here at Davis last October through Hunger Among Us, that 70% of people in the county are food insecure, which is pretty significant. Other problems or principal issues that we found was that the food bank is limited in the funds that they have to purchase fresh produce. They have funds to purchase produce, but not the freshest that they possibly could obtain. And by creating a food bank farm that could help supply them with more financial resources, they could actually target the products that they want and actually expand the nutrition education programs that they are implementing in schools throughout more rural areas, not just in Davis, but in Esparta and other areas. The goals in this project were to help, ultimately, the food bank farm receive resources to help with their goals. It was to help Shane and Marcia find the most effective and productive way to produce on their farm so that they could, in some way, make a charitable donation to the food bank farm. The actions and outcomes of our project was a business plan. It was this report, and primarily, and then after was the consolidation into a business plan, which was the food bank farm project. And lastly, we're going to go over the recommendations for the entire project as a whole. So just an introduction of who we are and why we chose to do this project. Food insecurity is a big issue. It has a big issue when you can see it in your community. It becomes a bigger issue when you know people are hungry, and it becomes an issue that you want to fix. No one wants to see someone hungry, especially when there's so much available food. Personally, it was one of the reasons why I picked up this project for my senior capstone. There was another option. This pretty much called out to me. The same with Zach. We kind of were drawn towards this as something to work on. It also established a community project. Community is a big part in supporting food and supporting food programs, and in order to get food programs implemented, the community really needs to be involved, and community involvement in sustainable ag and food systems is really important. The food connection part was to connect people to their food. It's connecting the community to food. And that's also really important if this project was going to be prevalent. The key contributors, again, were Dawn and Marcia and Kevin. Introducing them, Dawn is actually the supervisor currently of Davis. He's actually served as city mayor. He has worked on the in the Davis Joint Unified School District, and is one of the facilitators of the Yolo County Food Connect program. So he has a really big interest in kind of working on food problems and food insecurity issues in the county. When talking with him initially, we kind of came up with these 3 goals. For any project that we chose to work on was to utilize land to resource food insecurity. So initially when we started our project, we found out that there are unutilized parcels of land within Yolo County that can be used to grow food. They're not significantly large, but they're class 1 grade soil. They're able to be produced on. The only reason they're not being used is they're inaccessible to farm equipment or large production. These unused parcels of land would have to depend on human labor and resource, like people actually going out and planting and picking, which is labor intensive. The program needed to be beneficial to farmers, so we had to find a way to benefit farmers, farm owners, landowners, and at the same time kind of institute an educational background in some way, institute education in this whole project. Also creating community interest. So in any project that's going to be based in the community or supported through the city needs to have community interest and, you know, a clientele that they're going to reach. The other client, Shane and Marcia Tucker. Shane actually couldn't make it here today because he is in San Diego working on another farm that he owns. This is Sluicide. So this is a picture of the 1/4 acre that, or the 1.5 acres that would be used that Shane and Marcia want to produce on. This is actually an aerial picture. So it's about 1.5 acres, relatively small, but at the same time a lot can be produced on that 1.5 acres if it was just a small farm. I don't know if anyone's ever been out to the student farm, but the vision was possibly to do something similar. So in meeting with Shane and Marcia Tucker, we kind of decided that this was the key concept, this was the key idea in creating the Food Bank Farm project, was to use unutilized parcels of land. How we were going to do that was still kind of up in the air. The linear, we kind of initially started with a linear model. Shane and Marcia had this idea of simply investing time and resources that they had in a charitable project or in a charitable donation. So they were going to put personal time, effort, and resources into growing and donating it to the food bank, which is very honorable. But if we were thinking from the perspective of growing this project throughout the county, perhaps not everybody has that same sort of background or the same type of resources that Shane and Marcia had. If another farmer wanted to participate in the program but didn't have necessarily that type of resource to just start this project off the ground, how are we going to address it and how are we going to incorporate other farmers? So Kevin Sanchez is the last client that we're going to talk about. He is the director of the Yolo County Food Bank, and in meeting with him, we really started to find out just what the food bank does. Initially in my mind, I just thought food bank gets food and distributes it out to people, and that's kind of it. There's really not much there except, canned food drives and those kinds of things. But as I talked to Kevin, I kind of learned that it's a lot more than that. There's a lot more going into the thought and consideration of food that's being given out to the community. Kevin really rallies behind trying to get the freshest produce possible and the healthiest produce possible. He initiates a lot of nutrition education for his patrons. He wants to run cooking classes. He wants to increase his farm to school education for the students. He runs the Kids Farmers Market program, which services about 600 students, and in the next couple months wants to double to increase 1,200 other students. Each farmer's market sends home each student with about 10 pounds of fresh produce, which multiplied by 1,200 kids ends up being a lot. And by running the Food Bank Farm project, we're hoping that we can start helping him achieve his goal of acquiring more produce so that he can give it to all the 1,200 students, so that there doesn't have to be a lessening of how much food these students are going home with. So the next slide is the business plan. So throughout this 2-quarter process, we developed a couple different plans and methods in order to achieve all of these goals. The very first method that we basically, began with was a linear model.
and this was very similar to farmers already doing shared acres. So shared acres relied on an initial funding source. That would be the farmer investing money into seed, equipment, and labor, and he would donate a portion of that crop off to the food bank of Yolo County. So that would be routed through the farms to the food bank of Yolo County. The issue with this is that it's more of a one-time use, and it also requires a lot of generosity on the part of the farmer. So we wanted to try to develop some way in order for this to persist and continually be able to expand as well and still meet all of these goals. So the method or the model that we came up with was more of a cyclical model. And it, again, started with an initial funding source, but this time it would be a one-time source, either from grants or community donations or possibly micro-lenders. And then it would be routed through food bank farms, is what we've termed it. Thank you, Kevin Sanchez, for giving us that beautiful coin term. But this would be basically a nonprofit. The benefits of a nonprofit is that it's able to create a surplus for expansion, as well as paying or giving stipends to employees. It can also circumvent liability issues. So people are working on these small parcels. Food Bank Farms leases out that parcel for, say, $1 or so, and all the liability is taken off the farmer. So that's one great benefit. So Food Bank Farms is this entity in space, basically. And then what it does is it funds these farms, these micro parcels, and also the employees or the interns to basically produce food that will then be sold, generating income. And from that income, hopefully, it will be able to then generate surplus and also cover all expenses, as well as leading to expansion, which act as a interest or an investment with a compounding interest, because if you were to route more money into expansion of farms and producing more, you ultimately have more income, which then generates more of a donation to the food bank of Yolo County. Next slide. So these are basically just roughly the different steps in this production model. All right, so coming up with a business model, we also wrote up a business plan, very detailed, and we decided that the possible products of these farms could be fresh produce. It could also be processed non-perishable items. But the different segments that you could potentially sell these through would be CSAs, farmer market, and retailers. This approach would be using, total approach focuses on two things, both the product, as in like its health, and you're pushing that it's good for you and it's worthwhile, as well as a logo. Food Bank Farms, because it's a nonprofit, offers this amazing ability to increase the product's price by differentiating it, because it basically it adds a tremendous amount of value. So the message, this could ultimately change, but just fragments feeding our future, just a little slogan. The tools, obviously, newspaper advertisements, flyers, word of mouth, press releases, and delivery, again, in supermarkets for retailers, and then farmers markets, and then the timing and frequency, just at the beginning of this project, really publicize it, and then also offer samples. So the market that you should originally focus on would be probably citizens of Davis, because I'm assuming these farms would be located in the general area where possible interns and employees from the university could easily visit these farms, as well as the citizens of Davis are very kind-hearted and more likely, I feel like, to support this. And then once established in Davis, and it makes enough of an income, you could expand this project to then sell all over Yolo County. The important things to realize though is that you need to examine any relevant studies on marketing to see if this product would actually work. And then also there's opportunities through the USDA and various other government programs that can allow you to do marketing research. So this product again would be a high quality product that's differentiated. It focuses on sustainable organic production and is for a philanthropic cause. So obviously there's competition anywhere in the business world. In the farmers market, most likely there will be competing products, very similar. The ability to differentiate this through its cause is a tremendous benefit. The one issue though is ultimately food is an inelastic commodity, so people aren't going to eat more. So it really needs to sell itself. So the pricing, one crucial thing about this is that it's different. That allows you to then use cost-oriented pricing, which is basically the cost to produce and then desired profit margins. So you could say 10%, 20%, depending on how well it does in market research.
Okay, we wanted to just touch base. We wanted to go over the final recommendations, both in terms of our Food Bank Farm report, which is the first half of what our project was the research and the development of Food Bank Farm as a nonprofit, and also go over the recommendations at the end for the business plan if this was to actually come to reality. In the report, we decided that although we did a lot of research and really tried to be as informed as possible, there was a lot of loose ends and a lot of exponential growth as we investigated the Food Bank Farm as a project. We'd go down one road and we'd find that, you know, oh, we want this to be a nonprofit, okay, and have volunteers come and work on these farms. It was the idea or the concept that with the Food Bank Farm being a nonprofit, it could go to the farmer and lease the land, so now the farm owner is absolved from that liability issue, and have Food Bank Farms hire interns and farm managers to come work there. That sounded like a great idea until maybe a week ago we found out that now there's regulations on having volunteers and interns work on nonprofit farms and that are mandated by the state. So now we'd have to go back and like research that and figure out what parameters would fit or not fit into the Food Bank Farm project. So one of the suggestions in following up with this report is to establish a professional or somebody else or just students to continue research and continue investigating how this Food Bank Farm project would fit into the community logically, what it means to be a nonprofit, what it means to be in a community as a nonprofit agricultural program. Is there certain regulations it's supposed to follow? Is there certain responsibilities that the nonprofit would have to the community? Secondly, for the report, we decided that outreach to the community was very, very important. Implementing this type of program in the farm world is very interesting. Lauren actually brought us to our attention that stepping on the toes of farmers by implementing an agricultural program that could potentially add competition might not be the best way to kind of either promote the project or kind of go about doing it. For this Speed Community project, we want the community to be involved. We want farmers to be involved. We don't want to put out of business other farmers by creating a product, either if it was honey or if it was tomatoes or if it was eggplant. Like, competing with the farmers that are already in Yolo County producing was not something that we want to do. We don't want to infringe on their markets. It's hard enough being a farmer. There's no need to create more competition between the small producers trying to do good. So outreaching to them is really important. Surveying their interests, surveying farm owners or landowners that would be interested in letting us use their land, and Food Bank Farms come and lease their land, and participating in this kind of project was also really, really important. Also, lastly, was facilitating a cost analysis, computing how much would actually have to be put into this project to get it up off the ground from start to finish. How much would that initial investment that we were talking about in our cylindrical model, how much would need to be put there to get this project started, and how much would it need continuously to function? That initial funding source we were hoping was to be a one-time grant or donation, but if it was renewable grants annually, or if it was through fundraising, or if it was through some other source, what could we do possibly to keep that program running and keep food bank farms running? One of the recommendations for the follow-up for the business plan, not the report, but actually the business plan, was to actually establish a nonprofit. We would need someone to come in and actually facilitate the paperwork, and I think Don suggested he has somebody on hand who could do that for him if the project was going to start in the county offices or like within the city. Establishing that nonprofit, you're going to need that person. You're going to need to put together a board of directors so that there's no conflict of interest. You need to make sure that everybody on the board has the project in mind, has the people it will be working with in mind, and the farmers in mind. More than that, it would be the board of directors' responsibility to find farm managers. It would be the board of directors' responsibility to find the right type of grants for the program, to keep the program running, and to facilitate the educational properties of the project that we really wanted to see kind of come through. Food bank farms, on top of being not a for-profit, but as a way to facilitate money through this program, the educational side of it was to allow or to give the community opportunities to come and work out on these farms. The labor sourcing for this was a huge deal, was a huge part of trying to figure out how this was going to work. It was one of Shane and Marcia's main concerns. Is it going to be them two at 9 o'clock at night after a day of working, going out in the field and picking the tomatoes or whatever they decided to grow? Or could we instead use a community organization like Green Corps or Center for Land-Based Learning or high school organizations to come out and volunteer and get that hands-on experience of farming and get that knowledge of what it means to, have a farm and work on a farm. So the final recommendations for the project was to kind of incorporate all those things in the idealized version of the food bank farm project. So that kind of concludes the
And then some of the future questions that we might want to ask are long-term goals for expansion. How much money initially do you want to invest into the new farm expansion versus how much money do you want to donate directly into the food bank in Yolo County? Additionally, is there a need for inventory or storage? Does it need to be a physical space? Hiring practices, who exactly will be working? Will it be university interns? Will it be like new farmers, young farmers looking for an opportunity? Branding and marketing, obviously someone out there could do probably a better job of creating a better logo and slogan than we could. So the potential is out there. Processing and packaging again. Distribution methods, whether or not CSAs are better than retail markets or farmers markets. Production size to be economically viable, something that Emma mentioned earlier, is exactly how much produce do you need to produce at what cost. And then finally, focusing on a specific product. Do you want to just have food bank farms develop one product like heirloom tomatoes, honey, olive oil, something like that, versus multiple goods? So educationally, people get a very diverse opportunity to experience growing carrots, tomatoes, everything. So I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you guys.
Thanks. For questions, if you guys didn't really understand something, we could clarify, or questions about the capstone in general. I know there's some new students here who might be coming in as SAS majors or taking the course next year.
And maybe start with reactions from.
Yeah, I would love to hear anything you guys have to say, what you guys think.
All done.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Thank you. Anything you guys would like to see grow more detail, or something that Marcia had done?
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked about the whole nonprofit idea, because Shane and I talked about that too. Do we start a nonprofit to facilitate this so that it is expandable beyond one farm? That's the big idea. It's not just for us to do it, but to get other farmers to do it too. And I think the hard, for us individually, that was too much to take on to start a nonprofit. But and also in doing some research of nonprofits and knowing you have to get a board and all of that, we wondered whether it would be a good idea to partner with a nonprofit that already exists, be it the food bank. Can there be an arm of the food bank, or can there be an arm of the Center for Land-Based Learning that takes this on as a project? And that would be something that I think may be worth exploring. You know, do you start your own nonprofit, or do you build off of a nonprofit that already exists, so you don't have to create everything?
Yes. So that was one of the things that we talked about. We came up with it being its own nonprofit just because we thought that although that there are already agricultural, educational, and like outreach programs existing, in the end, we hope that somewhere in the future at Food Bank Farms, it can go from being a concept or an idea to having an actual physical space, for being a location where people can go, whether it's here in the city of Davis or somewhere. Kevin's really centrally located in Woodland, and actually the center of Yolo, which is really like a great location for his spot, but maybe more located in a more like metro area like Davis, this can become a location where farmers can go and find out about available properties that want to be part of the Food Bank Farm project. They can find out about available resources, about crop growth and like what types of crops are being already grown, what needs to be grown. Marchette actually had a farm manager for a while who put together an entire data packet on crops and how long it would take to grow it, how much it would cost, how much time, when it would be harvested. And that kind of resource and that information is really valuable, and if we can consolidate it into a location where people can come and access that, we feel like that would be a really good purpose for having this being its own entity instead of it being a branch off of something like the Center for Land-Based Learning or the Food Bank. But those were ideas that we considered, and we had to battle with it and try to manipulate to kind of figure out the best option.
To follow up on that though, I just thought it would be maybe for liability reasons better to have its own entity rather than it being dependent on the Yolo County Food Bank, because if something were to happen and maybe there's a lawsuit, I think potentially they could go after all the assets of the county food bank. I'm not exactly sure, but I just thought that was one of the more powerful reasons why it should be created separately.
Okay. Well, if I could make some comments, it's been wonderful watching the evolution of the project. And of course, we started with one direction, and I think something along the lines of your linear model that you displayed, and the theory that to the concept was that maybe there are a whole bunch of these small fragments around the county. In fact, we think there are. This emerged from discussions with Shane actually during the course of the October summit. In October 2012, we had our Food Connect summit here. And during the course of that discussion, Shane got excited and talked with Marcia, and the two of them said, well, expressed their interest in pitching in a new and bolder way than they had previously in a charitable purpose. So if there were others situated around the county, the theory was, we could perhaps not only help them actualize that impulse, but take the opportunity to build a toolkit and have a lessons learned exercise around how could others pick this up and do it. I think that the evolution of the project from that original concept has been very, very productive. I love the branding of Food Bank Farms, and I think that that really resonates and will engage lots of people with this overall impulse. I can see that a nonprofit would be a very good idea. It could be a separate one, but it wouldn't have to be the food bank either, because we have several others who've been working in this space that I think might have a strong interest here. We've got this farm to school group that we call Farm to Fork. That might be an interesting. They might be interested. But in terms of setting up a nonprofit, maybe feels daunting, but it's not so much. I think there are about 700 of them in Davis working on it. Literally, one of your colleagues here, Frank Hertz, has done some work on nonprofits and how they all are. There are really literally about 700 in the county. In Davis, excuse me. We could fairly easily put that together. I think that there remains, for me, as with any good project, you identify, you go a certain distance, and then you identify the 16 things that you'd like to go to next. And some of those are starting to pop up for me. I think a toolkit for folks would be be a good one that we can get into in the next generation. I could see, there's, I ran, so I'm going to say one kind of take you down one more tangent here that's really kind of interesting in this arena that we're working in. We had a meeting of Food Connect yesterday, so this is YOLO Food Connect. Of course, Kevin is there, others are in, maybe others in the room who are present. And that's the launching pad, the connecting point for a lot of ideas. As it turned out, there was a woman who came for the first time to our gatherings that have been happening once a month or so. And she sat next to me, and we went through the meeting. At the end, I asked her what her background and interest in the meeting was about. And she identified herself as the operator of something she called Farm 2.6. Well, that sounds like a really cool, cachet kind of name. That's neat. Farm 2.6 is about a half mile north of the property that the Suicide Farms is at on Highway, on County Road 95. And what she has is a 2.6 acre farm that is currently being used in just the way we're talking about. And she has, in addition to that 2.6 acre farm, she has her operation is a nonprofit called F period, A period, R period, M period.
Oh, yes.
So it's FARM. And so she also has 2 parcels in the city of Davis. One is just a front yard. And she says that between these 3 parcels, they've produced 100,000 tons, 100,000 pounds of produce that they then distributed, not through the food bank, but to direct users. And one of the users is the Cesar Chavez housing right on Olive Drive. So it strikes me that another one of these avenues could be to look into what she's doing and how much of that might be replicable in other situations, like we're talking about. Maybe it could be Farm 3.6 instead of Farm 2.6. So I can't tell you how excited I am. I think you've done a really nice job, and it's really this is the sort of the initiation of the capstone efforts. I think that a lesson here for us is that a project starts in one place, and with check-in and ongoing work, it evolves to a better answer than the question initially posed. And so, congratulations.
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to speak to that really quickly, just as into finding farmers like Marcia and Shane that had these parcels of land. As far as we were concerned, the linear model that you guys were using works. It's not that it doesn't work. It gets, you do what you want to do, it gets you what you need. But as many of us who would like to participate in the project, farmers usually have charitable hearts. They just don't have charitable circumstances. And as we find, like we said, as you survey the land, or as you survey the community in the county, we're hoping to find more farmers that we can connect with. When we were talking to David Morrison, who is the planning department of the county, and John Young, who is the ag commissioner, he made it very obvious to us that finding the personal information of landowners is semi-difficult. It's not the easiest thing to kind of go. You can't just knock on a door and hey, we want to use your land. So getting through that obstacle and trying to search for that was just, it seemed a little bit more daunting. And if we were going to keep focusing on this project, going out and doing that would have taken a lot of time and resources. But it's a great next step for the project is to start consolidating farmers like Shannon Marcia and like Farm 2.6 to kind of get them together. And as we get them all together, kind of switch them onto this other model that we've built.
And I think while we may not be able to access the data, we can sure access the people through networks. And there are a lot of connection points there.
Which is the hope of the Food Bank Farm, is to create a networking resource. People, community members can come talk, and by word of mouth or by whatever process, people start to learn about other people who are doing similar projects. Yeah, so that's it.
Other comments or questions?
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier talking about a report versus a business plan.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the first part of our project, in the first quarter, we kind of established an idea. We met with our clients. We kind of facilitated through what our question was, what our goals was, what our objectives were, what it was going to be at the end of these 2 quarters, because it's a 2-quarter process. The report kind of is a narrative. It speaks to the process that we had, the ideas that we had from start to finish. It kind of pinpoints what the problems and the challenges we faced. how we kind of got through that, the ideas that we came from that, and like our final conclusions based on, you know, the challenges of finding land, the challenges of finding the correct modes of production, the correct methods to incorporate education to the entire program. The report at the end, the business plan, is the physical document that we were creating for Dawn, who was our main client, and for Marcia and for Kevin, to kind of see how we wanted to build this project and how it would affect all three of them. So it was a business proposal, it was a business project. Usually it can change per project. I know that the Fiber Shed has a different, their end product, their output is different than ours. It kind of can change and will certainly change as more students become part of this major and do this project.
So this was very polished. I love the logo and everything. And Don was very kind. He said, talking about an evolutionary process, which we're grateful to you for supporting and understanding. But so evolution sounds very smooth. And I think, like anybody, these things have ups and downs. And I was thinking about the students. We have some students here who might be doing the capstone next year. And I was wondering if either or both of you had anything you want to share about it. You know, what were those times where you had to just radically go in a different direction, or where you had your doubts, and then how did you stay the course to get to this wonderful product? Because I think that's the key is not, oh, we'll start with the blueprint and it will just be this linear process. It's that up and down part.
You look like you want to rant. So you know what.
Me, that's so much fun. Well, it's definitely a process. You know, the capstone is kind of bringing together everything you learn as the senior. You're bringing together all the classes that you take, all the knowledge, all your internships. It's kind of compiling it and putting it to, you know, applying it to the real world. This is, you know, you work with the real world client. You're actually doing something. You know, this isn't just a hypothetical. It's, you know, you're trying to reach a goal. It's not easy. It's challenging, and if it is easy, you're probably not doing it right. It takes a lot. You know, everyone's different. Everyone has a different idea or different methods, and you know, me and Zach disagreed a lot about the idea and how this project should work, and what was important, and what was key, and what was necessary. And it's kind of just finding that compromise, and you know, understanding and respecting someone else's learning process, and incorporating that and finding balance. We worked with two. It was just the two of us. Fiber Shed had 8 other people, so they found their own challenges in working with a lot. We found our own challenges working with the field. I would kind of suggest in the future, probably working with splitting that up. You know, 4 and 4 might be a better idea. 8 seems like a lot. 2, it gets really complicated. But in the end, this project was really helpful. It's really resourceful, and it's something to really be proud of when you're done as a senior. To be like, I did this. I created something that didn't exist 20 weeks ago. So.
Is it Harrow's postulate or theory or something? It's this idea that basically, like, the more people that you have involved, you're trying to come up with different, like, outcomes, and basically sometimes what happens is you don't necessarily agree, and that's not, like, the product that you both want. I think this is, like, a phenomenal project, but we both had to make sacrifices, and I think that was a crucial lesson that we both learned, is that you have to make small sacrifices and give up on ideas. You also have to logically defend those ideas, and you can't be emotionally driven, especially when it's something that's supposed to function in the real world. If you do that, then I don't know. I think of it as like a spaghetti strainer, and basically like the business model is you covering up all of those holes, and you're trying to get it as specific as possible in order to make it not leak. I forget who was telling me this story, but it was in our seminar. Basically, this guy, some South American country, shot with an AK-47 a big oil drum with water, and it had 3 holes ascending, and you need to work from the bottom and plug them all the way up. So it's getting that basic grounding and then working to more detailed, I guess, answers. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, like specifically for this project, like an example between that we disagreed on was that I saw this project as a great opportunity to incorporate more agricultural education and like community involvement and do all these good things for the community. But Zach kind of brought it back to, okay, so how's it going to financially survive? Like, how do you balance out all these like free things you want to do and like have this program actually be economically viable and keep going? Like, if there's no money coming in, how are you going to keep like all these programs going and supporting the food bank and doing all the things you want to do? So we really had to kind of fight out how that was going to be balanced and how we're going to get to this business plan and this like report to include everything. And that's part of what the narrative is about, is kind of talking about that process and hashing out those kinds of ideas.
So I have to ask one more question. Because many students at Davis, I think, are skeptical about team projects. It's like, if I could just do it by myself, it would be better. At this point, what would you say to that? Is that right? Or did this come out better because, we'll put it this way, by compromising, did that produce kind of least common denominator, or did that produce creativity?
I think it produced creativity, especially since if you work by yourself, you're not challenged and you're not like forced to kind of look outside your own box and manipulate your thoughts and incorporate other people's. We don't live in a world where we're on our own. We live with other people. We have to learn to interact. And this capstone really gives you the opportunity to kind of learn what it's like to work in a team setting. Unless we're going to professions where we're by ourselves and we never have to deal with anyone ever again, then this is really helps kind of facilitate that process and make you learn how to work with somebody else. Like, you really don't have a choice. Like, you will learn. If you don't know how to do it when you start, you will know how to do it when you finish this class.
I'm going to use another weird example, but imagine two prisoners with the chain around their ankles. It's basically a process of being pulled and being tugged, and a lot of times Emma was phenomenal about getting the project started and basically laying out everything. And there are other times where I felt like it was like strenuous in the same regard. That wasn't meant to be offensive at all. But it's basically it's a great, phenomenal experience to learn to run in unison so you can, like, I guess, travel the greatest distance. So.
Oh, wow.
No,
So, yeah.
So he's the word master here. So I think that there's another element of interaction that you had in this and that others will have with capstone in the future. You had three very different, you talked to other people too, but the three of us we each have different perspectives, come from very different places, doing different things, and we each had expectations. So you had to navigate that as well. I think there were some ups and downs in that. So what's your lesson there?
Our lesson? Well, that it was all, everyone, you guys all three, although you guys all came from different places, you guys all had the underlying same want. Like, you all wanted to address this issue of food insecurity. You all want to help the communities that you live in. You all want to do something agriculturally related. So we've had to kind of find in each of you guys and in each of your wants things that tie together. And focus our project on advancing those. Advancing all your individual wants and needs is too difficult. That project would have taken much longer to individually produce something for all three of you that would address your needs specifically. But like a team project, team community building is the same way. Like, you have to find ways to connect with other people who have the same interests as you and find a way to tie you guys all together.
How would you advise your colleagues in the years behind you to pursue an effective relationship with clients?
Communication. You kind of need to learn to like have the confidence to talk and know what you're talking about, and have the self-confidence to be like, okay, I know what I'm coming in there, what I want to do. These are the things that I want to accomplish. I think a lot of students lose their inhibition or the idea that this is their senior project. Like, this project belongs to them, and as much as it is the client's idea and you're working with them too, you kind of have to also facilitate that, balance. Working with you, we were kind of battling it out, like, how are you going to meet your goals as a client and like our goals as a senior project? Like, what is it that we want to do versus what do you want to do, and what do you want to do, what do you want to do, and how is that all going to come together? So remembering that it's your project too is a big deal. Remembering it's your education, it's your experience. So you kind of have to make room for that as well, and not just get so caught up in, oh, I have to make this person happy, I have to make this person happy, and this whole project's about like giving them something that they want. It's about the balance.
I would just say try to focus on one specific client. It was kind of difficult trying to like fulfill everyone's needs, and I really wish I could. Like if we both had more time and this is like a full-time job, I'd absolutely love to see everyone's like needs fulfilled. But in the future, I guess just really try to focus on one client and their needs.
Emma,
Yes.
on that, when you have multiple clients or multiple targets, when you interview them, you're writing down keywords and key phrases. You go next person, you will find common words. That's how you find your solution. Is you find the commonality amongst different factions. And that's what you guys do. You did a beautiful job.
Thank you. Anything else? Any questions? New students?
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you describe what your initial scope of what you thought you were going to do when you first named this project, and how you changed the scope as you proceeded?
It's almost difficult to remember where we were 2 quarters ago. I would say it was very broad, and it was just like more like this emotionally driven, like majestic idea. And I think gradually over time, it's like definitely narrowed in the scope to pick up more details, seeing what works, what doesn't. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I know that in the beginning of the project we met with you, and you really helped us kind of like make the ideas clear in our own head what we wanted to do, and kind of helped us conceptualize what Dawn wanted. And then as we got more involved with Shane and Marcia and Kevin, how it kind of got bigger. In the beginning, it was just a simple linear idea of, hey, somebody wants to grow something, some food, and donate it. Okay, now build that, make that, spread that. Dawn's main idea was he wanted to see this kind of idea, you know, everywhere. He wanted to see it in this county, he wanted to see it elsewhere, other counties, Solano County, further out, wherever. But how, you know, that idea when we started was like, okay, so let's just have you play it. Like we gotta go find people who want to do it. But then as we, like within like a day of thinking about that, we're like, oh my gosh, not everybody can do that. So now we have to change. So we have to take a step back, and like immediately the project started growing, and immediately there was like all these other lists of ideas and problems and challenges and goals and new goals. And by the end, we had this cyclical 6-part model that was much different from where we started.
Yeah, I'd like to just observe, I remember you had an idea that you'd actually be delivering bags of food this spring from those corner parcels.
Yes.
And so there was a compelling, motivating, tangible, everybody could get it, driving image that you were going for.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've observed is in this process of stepping back, you have even your language and your content around organizational structures that can sustain an activity is like light years from where you started. And it seems to me like one of the insights is that if you're going to try to develop a model that is transferable, it has to transcend passion of one farmer. It has to transcend individual personality, and it has to have an organizational structure. And what I see that you've done here is really identify some key components of the organizational structure, which then makes it transferable. So, good work.
Thank you. Great. So those last comments were from our colleague Jessica Wright, who is a resource person for the class this term too. So congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you feel right now?
So really